and that he will punish the Jewish people in the latter days. And the reason they're supposed to be singing this song is just like Moses said it, is so the rest of the world will know that God is justified in so doing. Now, so that the Jewish people will know that I'm in no way am I against them personally. Like I said, they've always been involved with me. Throughout my life, I've met Jewish people, and they've always been very helpful to me. But anyway, to show you what I'm willing to do, I've already made a vow and a business contract. I will give 98% of my life's work on the energy invention of any monies that I receive of building a new Israel, which will not be called Israel. It'll be called by a name. Do you know? And I asked the guy, do you know that God is saying he's going to rename Israel and give it another name? And he's going to give it another place. And it's going to be in the midst of the Gentiles. And he's walking faster and faster as I'm telling this. No, I didn't know this. Well, I'm going to give you the quotes in the Bible. The land is going to be called Beulah. And I'm going to give you the exact quotes of God, what he says to you. You, the people, have not ever been told this. Now, God showed me the place. Now, to show you how he don't tell you things right up front. He didn't tell Moses right up front exactly how things are going to occur. You find it out when you start doing it. But anyway, this happened. The place that God's chosen happened with me this way. I was fixing to go up north to meet with a company on a generator. That's making generators on my technology. And I was taking a shower, and I had someone who was going with me, and she was looking at the map of the way we were going, and I came in, and she had a startled look on her face. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Look at this." And she started pointing to a place on the map. I never heard of it. She said, "I saw this place on a wooden plaque, high up in the air. That same name." She said, "What does it mean?" And I thought a minute, and I said, "Well, I think it's the place that God probably wants me to go when he punishes the earth. Because at that time, God had already told me what he was going to do to the earth. And I'd put it out all over the world and spent $25,000 telling the earth this. And the news people had turned away from me. They didn't want to hear it. So I said, while we're up there, we'll go see it. Well, I go up there and meet with these people, and I get there on a Friday. They look at it and said, "Give us a couple of days to think about it and come back on Monday." So during that time, we drove to this other place. Now, as I drove into it, it was so ugly. I said, "I wouldn't take this place if you gave it to me." And she said, "You make me feel bad saying that." And I said, "No." I said, "If there's a mistake made, you didn't make it." I said, "I made it." I said, "I thought this was that place." I said, "I'm just being honest. I wouldn't want this place." But anyway, I go into this little town that had that same name. And, the town was so little. It was a grocery store with a post office in it. And I knew this, this ain't got nothing to do with nothing. So I go on north. And as I go out of town, it comes to a fork in a road, and I know immediately to go to the left. And when I do, and go several miles and start down the side of a little mountain, then it's this as beautiful as it had been ugly in front of me. And I cross a cattle guard. And when I cross it, I pull over and stop. It's so beautiful. And what's amazing to me, when I get out of the vehicle and look backwards, now what had been so ugly, the stuff I had came through, looked like a picture. It was beautiful. I was dumbfounded. And I immediately felt this is the place that God wants me to be. Because it just touched my soul. It was so beautiful. And I was awed by it. In fact, we ate lunch there. It was so beautiful. Now, we ate lunch because it was about 12 or 12:30 by that time. And we had brought a lunch because we knew that this little town wouldn't have no place to eat. We bought, I guess, about 50 miles away. We had bought some food and brought it in. And we ate that lunch. And I said, I'm going to drive on. We drove a couple of miles, and we all came off of a good-sized mountain. And I looked off to the right, and there was a little cabin off. And I said, look at that little cabin over there. She said, I think this place is going to be for sale. I said, no, I said, these are poor people. I said, I know these people. I grew up with them. They don't own all this land, because it was just a little tiny cabin. You know, you could tell they didn't own spit. You know, just couldn't get by is what I felt, because I grew up with people like that, and I know it like the back of my hand. But anyway, I get in front of this house, and there's those two posts, and there's that wooden plaque exactly as she had dreamed it in a vision. She had dreamed that same vision before we left that morning, exactly on that wooden plaque. She got berserk, just beating around, jumping around like a woman can do, gets tremendously excited. And I said, I don't want to go in yet. I drive slap into another state on a little narrow road, dirt road, gravel road, slap into another state, down beautiful mountains. I don't see another house. I don't see another car. I don't see another person. Slap into another state. And then I turn around and come back. I come back, the sun is setting. It's probably 5 or 5:30 in the afternoon. I drive into that house where that plaque was that she had dreamed about. And I get there, the man was there eating supper with his wife and a couple of little kids, you know, running around. And I told him who I was, and he had never heard of me. But I told him I wanted to buy 50 to 200 acres of this land. And he said, I can tell you, this man who owns this lives in another state. He said, I just take care of his cattle. He said, I don't own nothing. He said, but he won't sell you one piece of it. I said, would you give me his number? He said, sure. So he gives it to me. So we drive back out, and we head back down toward the place that we had ate lunch. And so I tell God, I said, God, if this is the place that you want me to be, I said, you heard what these people just told me. I said, show me a miracle when I get up there where we ate at. And as I came around that mountain, there was a cloud hanging over that mountain. And soon as I came around it, soon as I made that curve where I could see where we had eaten, there was a bright light shining down, bright. And I'll tell you how bright it was. And there's tiny little pieces of ice falling. Now, I had chipped ice when I was a boy. Now, when you chip a big 25-pound piece of ice, when you chip it, it turns white. When you chip it, and it'll just pop off in little pieces, and it'll be white. It won't be clear, it'll be white. And you can't see through it. This ice was tiny, and it looked like diamonds. And it was just covering the vehicle. And as I pulled up and stopped, I got out. She tried to get out. She said, it's blinding light is blinding me. I can't see the ground. And she closed the door and stayed in. Well, I had asked for this miracle just before I got there. I sure wasn't going to run from it. I get out in it and start trying to lift my face up. But as I do, my eyes are pouring water. It is so bright. You have never seen the ground this bright in your life from the brightest sun anywhere on earth. My eyes were pouring water just to look at the ground. Now I got my eyes about this far up, and they just automatically closed, and I put my face to God. And I said, God, I'm going to ask you one more time. If this is the place you have chosen for me, I said, when I get to this cattle guard, let this ice stop. Now she heard me saying this because the door was still open. I get back in the vehicle, close it, and start. And I mean like you cutting it with a razor blade. And I've drawn a picture here that you're going to see of this occurring. As I crossed over that cattle guard, it immediately, from ice, turned to fine rain. And she started beating on the dash, saying, it's just raining, it's just raining, it's just raining. And as the hood went across that cattle guard, like you cutting it with a razor blade, it's fine rain on this side. And I made a little drawing trying to show you, but it's nothing like what I saw and experienced. I can tell you, you'd have been just as excited as she was. You'd have been beating on the dash probably harder than her, hollering, it's just raining. As I went across that, the ice would turn to fine rain until the whole truck was across it. Then immediately all the ice stopped, all the rain stopped, all the brightness stopped. I got out and I thanked God. I knew I was going to get 50 to 200 acres here. I didn't care who the man was. I got back to Lucedale, Mississippi, and I called him. And when I called him, he was real polite. He knew who I was, which kind of shocked me. He said, yeah, I know who you are, Mr. Newman. I don't doubt that you'd be a good neighbor. But he said, no, I won't sell it to you. I said, well, I think you will. Would you mind if I call you back in about 6 months? He said, no. I waited 6 months and called him back. He knew who I was. He said, no, I haven't changed my mind. I won't sell it to you. I said, could I call you back in about 3 months? He said, sure. And I called him back in 3 months. He said the same thing to me, and I asked him about another 3 months, and he said, yeah. And I called him back again. And when I called him back this time, I was getting angry because I'd seen all these miracles. And this is what I told him. When he told me, I asked him, would you sell it to me now? He said, no. Because then I said, this is what I said to him. I said, you better sell me this or God's going to bankrupt you. Now, he got mad at me. He said, I'll never sell you 50 to 200 acres, but I'll sell you all of it. I said, what? He said, I said I would sell you all of it. Now, that totally shocked me. Here's a guy who won't sell me 50, 200 acres, but he'll sell me all of it. So I immediately told him, I said, I better go back and talk to God. He said, yeah, I suggest you do that. I have never talked with that man again because I went back and I started praying to God. God, if you gave me all that land, I'd give it away. I was talking about thousands and thousands of acres. It's bigger than the existing Israel is. This guy, what he had was a phenomenal amount of land. A lot of it was government land that he had a 100-year contract with. A lot of the land's thousands of acres was his, but he told me what it was all about and what the kind of money it would cost to buy it. But I knew that I couldn't keep that kind of land. I'd have to give it to other people who didn't have anything. I'm willing to stay on 50 to 200 acres, but I couldn't stay on any more than that because it's against everything I believe in. There's people that don't have nothing. Anyway, I started telling God to tell me what he wants. And I prayed and prayed, and I didn't get no answer. So I told God, I'm going to just forget about it. When you tell me I'm to go, you'll tell me. And I said, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going back to work. So I went back on to work on the technology. Then around I guess it was 96, 98, something like that, God wakes me up one morning and speaks to me and tells me mentally, get up and read the Bible as I taught you to read textbooks. Well, I knew what that meant. I immediately get up and start reading from Genesis. And as soon as I get into it, Adam and Eve, it hit me like lightning. You make a contract with God and break it, and he's going to kick you behind, just like that, just like he did with Adam and Eve. They had the whole place. He told them, don't touch this one tree. Don't touch the one tree. I got one, and you got all these other ones. Greedy little pigs, the two people were, they got to go touch it, and they got to eat it. The woman is blamed for it, but I noticed the man, he doesn't resist it very much. He doesn't leave and then come back and get it. He gets it the first time. She offers it. They're both were guilty to me because you got one tree. And God says, that one little tree is mine. Just one little tree. Would you give me just one? And man says, no, I won't. That's what man has said to God constantly, no matter what he gives us. Now God says from the very beginning, when you read Adam and Eve, you make a contract with me and you break it, then it is broke by you and you will suffer the consequences. They were thrown out. A warning to the rest of the world, the rest of the Jewish people, the rest of the Gentile people, the rest of the people on earth. You make a contract with God and then violate it, you're going to get whacked. Now, isn't it interesting? We gladly give that to one another in every country in the world when two businessmen make contracts. And if one of them violates it, just violates it, the court will always rule in favor of the person who hadn't violated it. We give that right to one another, but we will not give it to God. And our history shows that. We lie constantly, and we're going to suffer the consequences for it. I'm not promoting Joseph Newman. I'm promoting what God has made me for, is to help bring peace on this earth. Just like I've said, if all the people of the earth, if you'll march on your country to your capitals and tell them to turn their Federal Reserve System over to you, the banks will be owned by that. You, at the end of the year, instead of you having to pay taxes, you will be given money. All the prices across the earth will be fixed at the same price. Everything will be the same, so you don't have inflations, you don't have depressions. You cannot have an inflation if you fix prices. It is impossible. I told you what I felt about this as a young man. I wanted to steal all the kids on earth and go to another planet and teach them this. God wants it taught here on this earth, and this is the judgment time. I'm just a person that God has brought in at this time to make it all occur. Now, to all the Gentile people, you're going to see God's quote. He tells you that God in David, which means reincarnation, will rule this new place in the midst of the Gentiles. I'm going to give you these quotes. This is going to come like lightning. I've told you that, just like it says in Isaiah, God says the earth will turn upside down. It'll shake like a drunken man. I put this up on the internet already. But to the Jewish people, look at what God is offering you. He's offering you a place, and anyone, whether you're Jewish or not, if you're a Christian and you care about Jewish children and Jewish people, it's no accident. Since day one, God has made war for the Jewish people in the existing Israel. And that was day one of May the 14th, 1948. I turned 12 years of age. It's no accident. On July the 2nd of that year. God says, He has a parable, in fact, that I'm going to give you the quote, that He says a child will be born before the woman ever has pain or travaileth. Never heard what I'm telling you, but I'm going to give you the quote for it. But listen to the very interesting phrase that God places in front of you. This child will be born before the woman ever has pain or travaileth. It was no accident that my mother woke on the 14th of January 1936 saying she had died and gone to heaven. It's no accident that I was born in 1936. 2 years later, the Jewish people started having persecution in Germany, having their homes taken away from them in 1938. Then they travailed, and they had persecution, and they named it of that birth, of a Holocaust. They had the existing Israel that God says through Moses that in the latter days, I'm going to punish you Jewish people. Moses scolds them when God tells him this. You can tell Moses is very disappointed. He says, how much did you betray God when I was alive? And how much more so will you betray him when I'm dead and gone? Now God tells you that in Malachi, it was 2,500 years ago in Malachi that God sent the last prophet to the Jewish people. And it's no accident that it's only 4 chapters. God is tired of talking. He says, I will take the heathens, in essence, I'll take the heathens and the Gentiles, and they'll know me better than you. And he tied all the religions together by the number 14. The mathematical odds, way over 105 million to 1 against accidental occurrence. All 7 major religions together are tied to that number. It's why he wanted the people in New Orleans all meet together and pray in a unison of one. Not to show hatred, not to show bigotry, not to show biases, not to show prejudice. Anybody I see downtrodden, it puts a rage in me. I know what it feels like to be there. And like I was telling my friend Jim, I remember when I was in 2nd grade, I think it was, that we was playing spin the tail on a donkey. And it was a girl's birthday and her mother was there. And anyway, the teacher put a blindfold around me. And it so happened I hit exactly on that tail. And the mother immediately spoke up and said, he can see. And the teacher said, no, he cannot. She said, yes, he can. He's from the orphanage home. And it made me so mad, I snatched it off and turned to that woman and I said, I don't want nothing that you got. And I threw it down and went and sat down. I didn't want none of the cake. I didn't want anything. And the teacher turned to her and said, you should not have said that to that young man. I put that on him and I know he couldn't see. But I know what people feel like who are downtrodden. And God had me feel it. Put fire inside of me. And I feel a rage. I felt it in Puerto Rico. And anytime I see that. Talk is cheap. How much blood are you willing to put on the table for your fellow human being? There wasn't any Christians and people running down to the orphanage home I was in. I didn't ever see them. There was one person I remember, Dr. Doran. And he had got shot through the neck getting away from Germany and had to leave his family. So he was real kind to the children in the orphanage home. He would come and give stuff to us. And I remember on Christmas, he gave everybody a silver $1. And that was a lot of money back then during the Depression. He was a very successful doctor, but he was the only person that we ever saw that we thought was give a hoot about us in the orphanage's home. I know what it feels like, and God had me raised in it. He molded me, just like he said he would. God tells the Jewish people, the child you look for, he says, I don't trust you to raise him. And I'll give you the quote. Because God tells you, I will raise him. Because he knows that you would teach the child to be biased and prejudiced, exactly as he describes in Malachi against all your priests. And this is what he says, I will put dung in your face, and I will take you with your solemn feast and throw you out with it. That's strong language from God, but it shows his total distaste. And he says, why? Because you have led the people astray and you have been partial in the law. And I'm going to show you a list. Some people right now are showing that the Federal Reserve System is tied to 6 or 7 very powerful Jewish people who gives their names and their places that they're at, tied to the Federal Reserve System, that's doing a lot of this stuff. Now, they don't charge interest to one another, but they charge it to the rest of the Gentile people and to the world. Now, I'm not damning the Jewish people per se any more than I am the rest of the world, because the rest of the world participates with them, just like the stock market. The Gentiles just run to it like pigs, to slop right behind them and participate in it. They got a brain. They should have seen the economic graphs, the same ones that I saw, should have been offended by it. Gives people hope and slaps them down with misery. And you take it into any production line and the guy would throw you out, yet it runs every production line in the Western world. I saw this as a young man. That's why Kenneth Giddens carried me around to everybody and said, you better know this young man. He's going to change the world, and God's going to have me do so. But I'm telling you that Israel is going to be in the midst of the Gentiles, just like God says it will. And he tells you there'll be no gallant ship with oars go thereby. So it can't be that this is something on a Mediterranean Sea, because right now Israel has always been on the Mediterranean Sea, and ships to this very day go by there with oars. God says this is not going to be. He also says what's going to happen with Israel, and he said the hypocrites are going to be shocked, and I'm going to give you the quote. But this is God's quote. Now I can back up everything I say, and you go see that I do. The hypocrites are going to be shocked, and they're going to be amazed by what God does, because who's going to exist in perpetual burning fire? That's radiation, fallout. That is going to occur. Now what I'm saying to the Jewish people, because God has always had good Jewish people get involved with me. And there was a banker in Houston, Texas, who got behind me. And I was up in Chicago with him, and he was Jewish, and he moved money from bank to banks. And this was on an exerciser, and his name was Jules Green. And we was up in Chicago, and he was talking with some other Jewish people, and I think they were from Europe. And anyway, they turned to him and said, so Joe's a muscle guy. And Jules Green said, no. He said, you're dead wrong. He's a thinker. And he did like this. He's a thinker. And said, not only that, he thinks way above any of y'all. He'll go off and leave y'all. And that's what he told them. Jewish people have always been receptive to me, just like I know where that little thing is that they put when you go into their house, that if you're Jewish, you will know that they're Jewish. They told me about that. They told me that they don't charge any interest to Jewish people. And they loaned me money and didn't charge me any interest because they saw me as different. And most all of them knew I didn't believe in God. They just knew I was a good person, and they didn't want to charge me no interest. Now you think about what I'm saying. If the world will listen to me, that means when you buy a house, you have to pay 3 times for the interest rates. You have to pay 3 times of what you would normally pay for that house. You could have bought 3 houses. You buy a car and you pay that interest. You're paying through the nose. You buy a heck of a lot more than 1 car. You pay for everything over and over and over and over and over. You pay on taxes on all the food. If you did what I said, the money is produced. It's not backed by anything. It doesn't need anything. This will all come together in the new Israel. Now, if the Jewish people get behind this, God makes you a promise. And I'll give you the quote, and it's a beautiful, beautiful promise from God.